Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into the history of Illinois, a state that's been right at the heart of the American story. It's been a battleground for empires, a powerhouse of industry, and the place that shaped one of America's greatest presidents. So how did a state that was once just vast prairie become this industrial giant, this political hotbed, and, of course, the land of Lincoln? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. We're going to explore the forces that transformed Illinois and really connect the dots, all the way from its ancient origins right up to the challenges it faces today. All right, first things first. We have to go way back, long before any Europeans even knew this continent existed, the land we now call Illinois. It was already a major hub. We're talking about a seriously sophisticated civilization. And that civilization was centered on a place called Cahokia. This was the largest, most influential city of what's known as the Mississippian culture. And look, this wasn't just some small village. No way. This was a sprawling city, a complex society that was thriving for centuries and influencing life all across the central United States.
Just look at this number, 20,000. At its peak, around 1050 AD, Cahokia might have had up to 20,000 residents. To put that in perspective, there wouldn't be a more populated city in all of North America, north of the Rio Grande, for another 700 years. It was an absolute metropolis for its time. And what they built is just mind-blowing. The centerpiece of Cahokia was this thing called Monk's Mound. It's this enormous earthwork, built completely by hand. We're talking basket after basket of earth. And the scale? Its base is actually larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. It's an incredible, incredible feat of engineering and just sheer human will.
But here's the mystery. By 1500, it was all gone. This massive, thriving city was just abandoned. We still don't know exactly why. Maybe it was environmental collapse, climate change, or maybe social upheaval. It's one of history's great puzzles. The people who came after them, the Illinois Confederation, well, that's where Illinois gets its name.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. The land is now a crucial prize in this big global game of empires, and it started changing hands fast. And you can see that right here. It really shows you just how much of a hot potato this land was. In just about 100 years, the Illinois country went from being French to British, and then, finally, it was handed over to the brand new United States. And every single one of those changes brought more conflict and totally reshaped the future of the region.
All right, now we're getting into the 19th century. Illinois officially joins the Union. And this is where it really becomes a stage for some of America's biggest, most defining dramas. And of course, the home of a certain very tall, very famous leader.
So Illinois becomes the 21st state back in 1818, and boom, settlers just flood in. But that expansion, of course, came at a heavy cost. It led to heartbreaking conflicts like the Black Hawk War in 1832, which ended up forcing the last of the native tribes out of the state. And it's in this really raw frontier environment that a young guy named Abraham Lincoln starts to make a name for himself. But here's the thing you have to understand about Illinois at this time. It was literally a state divided against itself. And this is so key. We're not talking about a minor political disagreement here. Illinois was basically America's whole identity crisis in miniature. You had the southern part of the state, they called it Egypt, settled by people from the South who were generally pro-slavery. Then you had the northern counties, full of staunch abolitionists from the Northeast. This created this massive cultural fault line right down the middle of the state, making Illinois a political battleground from day one, a dynamic you could argue is still there today. And all that tension boiled over in 1823 with a major referendum. The pro-slavery side made a huge push to make slavery legal across the entire state. But it didn't work. 60% of voters shot it down. This was an absolutely pivotal moment that officially kept Illinois a free state. Though, believe me, the fight was a long, long way from being over. So, when the Civil War finally breaks out, Illinois, with its favorite son Abraham Lincoln now in the White House, goes all in for the Union. They sent over 250,000 soldiers to fight. That's the fourth most of any state. And it wasn't just troops. Illinois also gave the Union one of its greatest generals, Ulysses S. Grant. So after the war, with its identity as a Union stronghold firmly established, Illinois was ready for its next act. It used its perfect central location and its natural resources to become an absolute economic titan, a real engine for the whole country. And the heart of that transformation? One word: Chicago. Its location was perfect. It became this massive hub for everything: lake shipping, canals, and most importantly, the railroads that were exploding across the country. It made the city and the state
totally essential. Chicago became the gateway to the West, the place where all the country's resources flowed through, fueling America's massive industrial boom. But all that explosive growth had a really dark underbelly. We're talking awful working conditions, widespread child labor, terrible housing, and that, in turn, sparked a powerful reform movement, also centered in Chicago. You had incredible people like Jane Addams, who started Hull House, fighting for real change. Their work led to some of the first laws in the country to end child labor and protect workers, especially women.
And that constant push and pull between raw industrial power and the fight for social justice really sets the stage for Illinois in the 20th century. It was a time of incredible extremes, just these wild swings from booming prosperity to crushing depression.
I mean, talk about whiplash. The Roaring '20s hit, and you've got this explosion of jazz music and culture. But at the same time, Prohibition fuels the rise of organized crime, with guys like Al Capone basically running Chicago. And then, bam, the Great Depression hits, and the whole thing just collapses. Banks fail, unemployment skyrockets, a total reversal of fortune. A couple of other massive things happened in this century that totally reshaped the state. First, the Great Migration, where hundreds of thousands of African Americans moved up from the South to cities like Chicago. This completely changed the state's cultural DNA. And then there was World War II. Not only did it finally pull the economy out of the Depression, but it also kicked off the atomic age, right there at the University of Chicago in 1942 with the first ever controlled nuclear reaction.
Okay, so after the war, Illinois is modernizing, but its politics, well, they become famous for two things. On one hand, you have real, meaningful progress. On the other, you have this relentless, deep-seated problem with corruption that, honestly, still dogs the state's reputation today.
And you can kind of see that back and forth here. Power just swings between Democrats and Republicans, and this really reflects those deep divisions we talked about earlier. During this time, they made some huge changes. The state got its first income tax, a whole new constitution in 1970, so yeah, important stuff was getting done.
But there was always that shadow. The legacy of corruption in Illinois is just notorious. And it's staggering, really. I mean, look at this. Four of the state's recent governors have gone to prison. It's created this pattern of scandal that has really damaged public trust and has become, for better or worse, a huge part of the Illinois story. And that brings us pretty much up to today, where the big story has been a really severe, ongoing financial crisis. What happened? Well, for decades, politicians from both parties just didn't fully fund the state's pensions for its workers. They kicked that can down the road over and over again, and now the bill has come due. It's a massive debt that's forcing some really, really tough conversations about taxes, spending, and what the future of the state's public services even looks like. So, where does that leave Illinois? It really comes down to this big question, doesn't it? From the ancient mounds of Cahokia to the modern skyscrapers of Chicago, Illinois has always been a crossroads, a place where ideas, people, and conflicts meet. Its future is still being written, and it seems like it will always be defined by that core tension. Its incredible legacy of innovation versus its long, difficult history of political struggle. Hey, if you want to explore more stories like this, we've got a whole playlist of U.S. state histories you should definitely check out. And if you enjoyed this explainer, do us a favor and subscribe to Notebook Summaries for more. Thanks so much for watching.